From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Open Line.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open Line. Glad you're with us tonight. Fascinating show. We are taking a look at the case of a death row inmate from Nashville. It is the subject of a powerful documentary that will debut at the Nashville Film Festival this week. Yes, the film festival is happening. It will be virtual, and this film is one of the documentaries that will play there. It's debuting there, and it's taking a look at a fascinating death row case, the case of Abu-Ali Abdur'Rahman. You've probably heard about it. And what I find fascinating about this film is it's kind of a journey back through time to when this happened and all that has happened since then here in Nashville history, frankly. And so I want to start by playing the trailer for this. It's about 2.5 minutes long. Then we will come back out and we'll talk with the filmmaker and also an attorney for Abu-Ali. So let's take a look at the trailer. Right now it's about 2 minutes long.
I have a client, former client, that's about number 5 or 6 on the list as a list of the 10 or 11 that they are planning on executing.
I don't know if I covered a death row case as closely as this one. What sort of drew me to this case was the fact that it was kind of complex, kind of morally troubling.
Perfect storm of bad things that came together in that one case that made it the tragedy that it is.
Did you think at that time you was doing a poor job?
Yes, sir. I did.
I didn't devote enough time to it. Messed up. That's just all that you can say.
This is the only case that I have the hundreds of murder cases and 15 death penalty cases that I've tried, that I would come before and tell you, hard as it is, that I made serious errors in this case.
Now you're here for first-degree murder. Tell me who was involved in that.
Somebody had to be treacherous.
Daniels, a trucking company dock worker, was stabbed repeatedly as he lay helpless on the floor with his hands and legs taped.
And I want to ask you, will you ever give that man and that woman a second chance? Can you go to the graveyard and pull him up out and say, we're going to give you a second chance?
Was there any legalistic strategy going on or just plain old deceit?
I never told my lawyer that I killed anybody. He told me to get up on that stand and plead guilty because you found blood on my pants. And that's just what I did. I'm always doing what I'm told. That man will tell you I'm always doing what I am told.
If Mr. Abdur'Rahman were tried today, he would not get the death sentence. I bet my life on it. He would not get the death sentence.
That's speculation, though.
It may be, but I would bet my life on it.
When he looked at the jury and said, I don't know you and you don't know me, that defined our failure in that case.
So there you see it. That is the trailer for You Don't Know Me, and it's the story of Abu-Ali Abdur'Rahman. We are now going to bring in via Zoom the filmmaker and the attorney. But the attorney you saw there in the trailer, the filmmaker, you can probably guess which one he is with the lighting. It's John Kent. John, right there. Thank you for being with us. And Brad MacLean, he's the attorney.
Happy to be here.
That you heard in that trailer. And I'm going to get to you in a moment, Brad, and talk about where things stand. But John, I want to ask you kind of how this all started and really focus in on the attorney that was a major part of that trailer. It's Lionel Barrett. People who have been around Nashville for a long time certainly have heard of Lionel Barrett. And that's kind of how this all started. Is that right?
Yeah, I have a friend from college who I'm reacquainted with, attorney Doug Patton, and he mentioned his mentor, Lionel Barrett, very famous Nashville lawyer from the 70s to the 90s. He said, look, Lionel is a goat farmer in Hickman County, Tennessee. He spins great yarns about Nashville crime stories. would you like to go out to the farm and see Lionel? And so, my wife Lisa and I were, we do commercial filmmaking for a living, but we also do independent films. And so it just sounded like something interesting. And our friend Doak said, definitely bring your camera, because Lionel, you don't want to miss Lionel telling the stories. So we went out to Hickman County roughly 2.5 years ago, and that's where it started.
And some of the cases, Byron Lotax Looper, David Terry, Perry March, he's been involved in some of the premier cases in Davidson County and in Nashville. And so I'm sure he could tell a lot of stories, but when he started talking about this story, about Abu-Ali, what did he say?
Well, the death penalty had started ramping up in Tennessee, and so there was a stretch, and Brad can specify 7 or 8 years where there was no one executed in Tennessee, and so the Attorney General, the dates were just being set around the time that we were meeting Lionel. So Abu-Ali was on his mind, and when it was referenced. His tone changed. When you're talking to Lionel on the farm, you feel like you're talking to Matlock in a way. He looks like an attorney. He sounds like an attorney. If you were casting a film for an attorney, a Southern attorney, it would probably be Lionel. But when Abu's name came up, his countenance changed a bit, and you could see that this case kind of weighed heavy on it.
What did you learn about our criminal justice system? I'm sure you learned a lot, but what kind of stands out to you about our criminal justice system as you kind of delved into this?
Well, I guess how many things can go wrong in a capital case at trial and then are not corrected on appeal? I'm involved in telling a lot of stories over the years, but I really have not been involved in capital punishment. And I'd always thought, and we had always thought that, if there were mistakes at a trial, it would be corrected during the 3 appeals processes. But what I learned is, that's very far from the truth. When there are mistakes made at the original trial, oftentimes those mistakes can't be reconsidered on appeal. And it's very disillusioning. It's one of the reasons we did the film, was to sort of take the story out of the courts and bring it to the people to hear what we consider to be an accurate portrayal of the truth.
And Brad, I'm going to ask you where this stands in a moment, but the bottom line that I want to get from you, John, is that Lionel Barrett is saying he messed up here, isn't he? And it's kind of amazing in this movie to see someone say, I was in over my head and I messed up and this is my big regret.
To Lionel's credit, he has done a mea culpa for 25, 30 years on this case. He is, unequivocally, he admits, this was not my finest hour. I made serious mistakes. You saw it in the trailer. There was never a point when we interviewed Lionel where he really defended his performance, nor the junior attorney, Sumter Camp, who was with him at the time. We interviewed Sumter. And both of them, to their credit, admit that they made serious mistakes in the case. So.
And that's where the title for the film comes, that he got up on the stand, Abu-Ali got up on the stand and said to the jury, you don't know me. And that's when they realized, or maybe it was later, they realized the fact they didn't know him was their great failure, that they just kind of overlooked so much.
Yeah, and at the sentencing phase of a capital trial, I did learn this, during the trial itself, you're on trial for the crime. But during the sentencing phase, your life is on trial because they're looking for mitigating reasons to not apply the death penalty. And Abu there are many mitigating circumstances that would have kept him off death row that never were brought up. So the jury never heard really who Abu-Ali was. What they had in their mind was a depiction of him that the prosecutor, John Zimmerman, had painted, which was a very false picture. And so when Abu says, I don't know you and you don't know me, and Sumter, the junior attorney who I mentioned, he said that defined our failure in the case. If we had done our job, they would have known him. So to us, that just seemed like the natural title for the film.
So Brad, I want to bring you in. Where do things stand now? This is a case, again, that's gone on for decades. And it's fascinating to look back at when this happened, but there's so much that has happened even in the last few years. But where do things stand right now?
Well, let me first say that this is procedurally the most complex case I've ever seen in my career and in my study of the death penalty and of the criminal justice system. The case has gone through multiple layers of appeal, and along the way we've had to deal with this procedural bars to presenting the merits of the case. But where we are right now is that last August 2019, we entered into an agreement with the District Attorney General, Glenn Funk, in a case that his case was reopened in state court, in the Davidson County State Court, to convert his death sentence to a life sentence. And everybody agreed to it, and the Judge Monty Watkins, took it under advisement, and then he agreed to the agreement and entered an order that set aside the death sentence and in favor of a life sentence, which Mr. Abdur'Rahman was willing to take. About 3 weeks later, the Tennessee Attorney General, without any prior notice to anybody, at least without any prior notice to us, filed an appeal from that, arguing that the state court judge, Monty Watkins, lacked the jurisdiction to enter that order approving the agreement. So that case is currently before the Court of Criminal Appeals. Mr. Abdur'Rahman had an execution date scheduled for April of this year, 2020. In December, the Tennessee Supreme Court stayed that execution indefinitely pending the outcome of the appeal. We argued the appeal in early June of this year and is now under advisement by the Court of Criminal Appeals. So we're waiting for a decision from the Court of Criminal Appeals whether to uphold that agreed order that was entered by Judge Watkins or whether not to uphold that order. So that's basically where the case stands.
And how unusual is that? How unusual is it for many years later the district attorney to come back and say, we don't think there should be an execution here, we'll agree to life in prison, and the judge signs off on that? How unusual is that?
Well, it's highly unusual. In fact, I'm not aware of a case like that before. There are several unusual things about this case. There are, when we were in federal court, District Court Judge Todd Campbell set aside the death sentence on the ground that Lionel Barrett and Sumter Camp didn't do their job. That in legal terms, it was on grounds of ineffective assistance of counsel. That was reversed by a 2-1 decision by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, but there was a very strong dissent. So we have one judge, a federal district judge, Judge Todd Campbell, and another judge in the Sixth Circuit, Judge Cole, who have both said that this death sentence should be set aside. And then now in state court, we have a prior opinion by Justice Birch, who's now deceased, but he was on the Tennessee Supreme Court, who said that this sentence should not be upheld. And then Judge Monty Watkins signed an order setting aside the death sentence. So we have 4 different judges in 4 different courts, the federal district court, the Sixth Circuit Court, and the Tennessee Supreme Court, and now the Davidson County Trial Court, who have all said that this death sentence should be set aside. There is no other case in the history of Tennessee with that kind of a history, and no other case in which the district attorney, whose office originally made the decision to seek the death penalty, they didn't have. They weren't required to. That was entirely a discretionary decision by the district attorney, that office is now saying this death sentence should not stand. And so it's not just highly unusual, it's unique. There's no other case like it. In the movie trailer, you are the one who is saying, I guarantee if this case were tried today, he would not get the death sentence. I may be paraphrasing there, but I think that's what you said. Why do you say that? Well, I say that because I've been doing this work. I was appointed to my first death penalty case in 1990. I've been involved in at least 7 or 8 different cases in which the death sentence has been set aside. I have not been involved in a case where the grounds for setting aside the death sentence were as extreme as they are in this case. The defense lawyers completely failed to do their job, number one, and number two, the mitigation evidence, both regarding the circumstances surrounding the crime and also regarding Abu-Ali, his character, his history, his mental condition, and so forth, is the strongest case I've ever seen. I would take this case and take it to trial with an absolute guarantee that he would not get the death sentence. That I am absolutely sure of. I'm not sure that he would be convicted of first-degree murder, but he certainly would not get the death sentence. And I remember watching the film. I had forgotten that I made that statement, but then my memory came back to me, and I absolutely stand by that statement.
So we've heard about, the death sentence is often handed out to people that don't have money to get a good lawyer. That's not the case here. Again, he had a premier lawyer at the time. And my question to you, and I'm going to ask John here in a moment to kind of go into some of the history of that, how that came about. But my question to you is, so they're arguing ineffective counsel, and we have the attorney, this prominent attorney, saying, I messed up. I've heard that argument of ineffective counsel before, but how unusual is it for the attorney to say, yes, I was ineffective? How unusual is it for the attorney who represented that person to stand up and say, I was, in fact, ineffective?
Well, I have seen cases where attorneys admitted to what they did and what they did not do, and then it was up to the court to decide whether that was ineffective assistance of counsel. But I've not seen a case like this where the attorney simply admitted in straightforward terms that he completely failed. But that's because it's indisputable. The fact is, people might say, well, he made errors, he made mistakes, his performance was anemic, and so forth. The fact is, he didn't do anything. He never met with Abu-Ali in the jail to discuss the case and to prepare for trial until the week before the trial. Until then, he had not done a single thing to represent Abu-Ali. Not a thing. There was a complete failure. There wasn't just a partial failure. There was a complete failure to do anything on behalf of his client. And, as I said, I've been involved in a number of death penalty cases where courts have set aside the death sentence on grounds of ineffective assistance of counsel. I have never seen a case, I've never been involved in a case personally, where the lawyer completely, absolutely failed to do anything for his client.
So, John, then I want to ask you, and you, I believe, get into this in the movie. How did an attorney who, again, this is not some public defender who's overwhelmed. I guess he was overwhelmed, but this is a high-dollar attorney. My question is, who paid his fee, and how did that happen? How did it happen that he was so ineffective he didn't even meet with Abu-Ali until a week before the trial?
Well, Lionel will state very explicitly he does not know who paid his fee. There is plenty of speculation and evidence that his fee was paid by someone who was involved with the crime. That is a very touchy point for Lionel. I believe Lionel about that. Specifically, to be completely honest, I think that Lionel never believed Abu. When he met with Abu and Abu was telling him the story of how he got involved in the crime, I don't think Lionel ever thought his story was credible, because it involved sort of mysterious Black Panther kind of group in Nashville with a religious organization called the Southeastern Gospel Ministry, led by some very powerful people in Nashville. This group had a paramilitary wing, of which was very small. Abu and the co-defendant, Duval Miller, were part of that group. I don't think Lionel ever believed that, even though the Metro Police and others had evidence that this was a real group operating in Nashville in the late 1980s. So, it remains a mystery to me in terms of how much he might have known about who paid it. But, he states very, very strongly in the film that he was not aware that his fee might be coming from someone who was or someones who were involved.
That's to me a fascinating aspect of this. Yeah, he was apparently part of a Christian military group that was trying to rid the neighborhood of people who dealt drugs, is apparently what they said. There were two people that went inside the apartment that night. Abu was one of them, and then another. And then there was someone else, wasn't there? There was someone who drove, is that right? What about this third person?
Well, yes, so the person who people talk about is a gentleman named Alan Boyd. Whether he drove or not, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of evidence that he was involved in orchestration of the crime, that the gun that was used was traced to Alan Boyd. Alan Boyd apparently gave money for the other co-defendant, Duval Miller, to leave town. He was the leader of this group and this was a mission that they had orchestrated to rid the black neighborhood, as you've stated, of drugs and numbers running and that type of thing. And yet he was never, Alan Boyd was never charged. It was never investigated.
And who is Alan Boyd? Alan Boyd's part of a big family, right?
He's part of R.H. Boyd Publishing, which is a wonderful Nashville business story. Very prominent African-American family. He was operations, I believe he was chief of operations in the late 80s, and Abu worked directly for him. And so he had enormous influence over Abu because he was his boss, as well as being, someone that many people might look up to. So that's their speculation. We know, and I think Brad could verify this, that he paid Lionel, but whether Lionel knew that the money was coming from Boyd or not, Lionel states very explicitly he was not aware of that. And that would definitely be a conflict of interest, because that should have been investigated. It just was not.
You talked to a detective who said he wanted to go down that road, right? He wanted to question Alan Boyd and go more down that road, but that they never went down that road. Is that right?
No, right. We talked to the chief detective, Garafola, now retired. And he said, he said very directly that Alan Boyd and others were at the trial, kind of making sure their name didn't come up. He said he was aware of their involvement, and he went to his superiors to try to get it. It would be another unit that needed to investigate. He went to his superiors, and they did not want to follow up. Now, Garafola said, of course, I'm saying, well, why would you not follow up? And Garafola speculated, well, money and power tend to, to kind of put a squash on things like this. So that's what the chief detective said.
And then who does Abu-Ali think paid for his attorney? Who does he think paid for Lionel Barrett?
Well, Abu had told his ex-fiancée, is a lady named Gail Hughes. She was sort of the intermediary between Alan Boyd and Lionel Barrett. And Abu had told Gail Hughes that Alan Boyd would pay for his attorney. And so Abu, I'm assuming that what happened is Abu was told, after Abu was arrested, they told him, keep quiet, keep your mouth shut. This is what Abu says. We'll get you a real attorney. Now, Neil McAlpin, who is in our film, Neil McAlpin was his original attorney, and it appears as if when Neil McAlpin started to snoop around the Southeastern Gospel Ministry, it was, that was not taken very well. And I'm assuming that what happened is he got a little too close to the people behind it, and so all of a sudden it was time to get a quote-unquote real attorney, and that real attorney it was Lionel Barrett who came in with the, with all the credentials that he
So
had.
it's fascinating. And you see, we can quickly sort of just start going from one question to another. But we're going to take a break now. We'll come back and continue our discussion. If you want to call in with a question, comment, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. We'll be back right after this.